Hello, hello. Karen Malone again, bringing you another presenter for the 2020 Rehab Your Life Virtual Summit. We have just been rocking and rolling, 16 different speakers to bring you a lot of good information to help you rehab your life. So, this next speaker I want to introduce you to. Her name is Toni Davenport. She has worked in the field of vocational rehabilitation for over 20 years. She is compassionate and dedicated to helping others advocate for the improvement of the quality of services for individuals with disabilities. She takes a holistic approach when working with others to ensure she is serving the whole person. She is the owner of Progressive Rehabilitation Services, through which she has been serving the Houston metro area in the public and private sector for over those 20 years. She resides personally in the Houston area, and she is looking forward to being able to serve you whenever you need to connect with her. Her contact information is available on our summit resource link. So without any further ado, I am going to be bringing Miss Toni Davenport to the virtual stage. Hey, Toni, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing, Karen?
I am doing well. I see that your title is scrolling across the bottom. First of all, I wanted to thank you for making yourself available to participate in the summit. You are, like I said, amongst 16 different speakers, helping me to be able to hold up the four pillars of Rehab Your Life, and you are supporting the Rehab Your Career pillar. So, your title is Disclosing Your Disability, Identifying When and How to Disclose Your Personal Information. I know that you have some good stuff for us, so I am going to go ahead and give you the virtual stage.
Okay, and thank you for having me, Karen. And before we get started, I would like to first define disability in a simple form so that we have just a basic understanding of what disability is. And a disability is any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, and that may be employment, that may be in school, just different areas of life. And disabilities range from a lot of different areas. When you think of disability, there can be mental health disabilities, there can be physical disabilities where you see individuals that have been paralyzed, that are maybe quadriplegics. Also, you may have individuals that have been injured on a job and they now have some type of back injury, or they may have a missing limb. Maybe some type of accident has happened to an individual. You have veterans that they have disabilities as well. May it be PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder from the things that occurred when they were in combat, or there may be a veteran that has a disability by, simply a accident from being in combat, where again maybe they lost a limb or something along that line. And then you have other disabilities that are developmental disabilities, and it could just go on and on. So there's a wide range of disabilities. And when it comes to, looking at a disability and employment, one of the main factors to consider is, can the person perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation? If the person at that point determines that they need an accommodation to perform the essential functions of the job, he or she needs to determine when and how to disclose that to an employer. So the first step in doing that, you want to look in three different areas. And one area is going to be self-exploring of one's strengths and weaknesses as it pertains to your disability and performing the essential functions of the job. The other area you would like to look into is understanding the advantages and disadvantages of disclosing your disability to an employer. And lastly, you want to look at your rights and responsibilities of a person with a disability and know what's available out there. So when we look at self-exploration of your strengths and weaknesses, you can do that by completing a questionnaire or some type of worksheet that lays out, what you're bringing to the table as it pertains to that job. And it's good to have either a job description or a clear idea of what the job entails. And then from that, you look at the checklist of what strengths you're bringing to the table as well as the weaknesses. And remember, as it pertains to that particular job. Also, the next step is to look at what reasonable accommodations can be implemented in the workplace. This can be done by accessing a couple of resources on the internet. One is called the Job Accommodation Network, JAN, and the other is the Searchable Online Accommodation Resource, and its acronym is SOAR. This allows the person to look at their challenges from the results of their exploration of the strengths and weaknesses and consider how those challenges might affect them at the workplace. And then based upon those challenges and strengths, the person can then determine the appropriateness of accommodation to fit their specific needs. The other area that you want to look at is understanding of advantages and disadvantages of disclosing and how to disclose. You can request an accommodation at any time during the application process. And what that means is you can actually ask for an accommodation in an interview. You can ask for an accommodation once you've been offered the job or during the course of your time working at a particular job site. If there is a time that you need an accommodation, you can request it. So there's not a particular time frame in which you can request it. It's just when it's needed. In general, you should request an accommodation when you know that there is a workplace barrier that's preventing you from doing your job due to your disability. So, as a practical matter, it is better to request an accommodation before your job performance is affected or problems occur, because at that point, the employer does not have to rescind the disciplinary actions that occurred prior to you disclosing about a disability. And another thing to keep in mind when you are deciding the advantages and disadvantages of disclosing and how to disclose is self-determination. And basically, what self-determination is basically you are taking responsibility and control of your life to make the decision whether to disclose or not. And you are accepting or taking responsibility that there may be a negative outcome or a positive outcome, but you are taking responsibility and making your own decisions. The last one, which is comprehensive, and I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but I will give a brief overview, and it's going to go into the rights and responsibilities of individuals with disabilities under the law. And I mentioned several times about reasonable accommodations previously. And I wanted to kind of give a brief definition of what a reasonable accommodation is. And a reasonable accommodation is a civil rights act that was passed back in 1990, and it went into effect in 1992. So it's called Title I of the Americans with Disability Act, and that acronym is ADA. And it basically requires an employer to provide reasonable accommodation to qualified individuals with disabilities who are employees or applicants for employment unless to do so would cause an undue hardship. Now, an undue hardship is if you were to ask an employer for an accommodation and it's going to create a lot of chaos, a lot of financial burden on that employer, or also just a lot of difficulties in the workplace. It may be where that accommodation causes an uproar with the other, your coworkers, or it just disrupts the whole workplace. In those instances, the employer may challenge the accommodation that is being requested. And you want to also keep in mind that by law, employers that have 15 or more employees are required to provide the reasonable accommodation if it doesn't impose an undue hardship. So just keep that in mind. So if you're working for a smaller company that maybe only has 7 employees or 10, they're not going to be held under that law because they don't have the 15 employees. In general, an accommodation is any change in the work environment or in the way things are customarily done that enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal employment opportunities. And there are 3 categories of reasonable accommodations. One would be in the application process of applying for a job. Also, the other would be in the actual work environment, making changes to the work environment, and also in a person with a disability being able to benefit the same way in a work environment as a non-disabled person, and also accessing those privileges and just having the same opportunities as a person that is non-disabled. Some of the most common type of accommodations, some of the most common types of accommodations are physical changes, such as installing a ramp. I'm sure everyone has seen the ramps at office buildings and doctors' offices, hospitals, places like that. Or modifying a workstation or a restroom. I'm sure we've seen those before as well. Another common accommodation in a workplace would be providing qualified readers and interpreters and or computer software. Um, Also providing a quieter workspace or making other changes to reduce noisy distractions. Training and other written materials in an accessible format, and telecommuting options. Some other possible reasonable accommodations that an employer may have to provide in connection with modifications to a work environment would be possibly a job restructuring, maybe switching someone that was once full-time to part-time, or modifying their work schedule, acquiring some type of equipment that may help them do their job a little bit more efficiently, changing maybe a test or training materials or policies, and reassigning a vacant position. So what I wanted to do briefly is just I came up with a little example of it's going to be an individual that has a disability, and I'm just going to kind of go through an example of him having the disability and what the accommodation would be. So it's a gentleman named Joe, and he's been diagnosed as having anxiety disorder. So when Joe is given a task to complete and it is not clearly explained to him, he suffers from panic attacks. In turn, Joe does not get his work done in a timely manner. So the challenge or area of need is going to be the anxiety disorder. And what does that do? That impacts his work performance. It has an impact on his work performance. Work does not get done because Joe panics when tasks are not clearly explained to him. And then the accommodation would be Joe will perform his job better with written instruction as a guide. So that's just a simple, cut and dry disability and someone needing a simple accommodation for that disability to be more efficiently with work. Um, Another thing that I would like to talk about is disclosure. If you decide to disclose your disability, you want to remember some things, and that is keep your disclosure statement short, simple, and to the point. Um, when we talk about disclosure, it will be to your advantage not to just get asked for a verbal accommodation. You will want to do something in writing so that you are protected, and so that you have something that is kind of, you could go back to if the employer may give you a little problem, or you need to bring some other individuals into play with you trying to get that in place. So if you decide to disclose your disability and request an accommodation, you want to do that in writing. So, but you want to keep that statement short and to the point. You try not to go into long explanations about your disability and why you need it, why you need the modification or accommodation. You want to summarize your condition in one or two sentences. You need, if it's anxiety disorder, if it's depression, if you have a back injury or something, you want to just do that in one or two sentences. You don't want to give when the onset of the disability and give a long drawn out scenario. You want to state your challenge with your job, or your ability to perform or inability to perform the essential functions of the job. And then you want to explain what specific accommodations will address your challenges. And remember, the employer is not the one that's going to come up with the accommodation or request the accommodation. It is for that individual employee that has that disability, that is now aware or is experiencing some type of challenge in performing the job. So you want to remember to offset any personal weaknesses by strengths that you may have. So you want to talk about your strengths, but then you want to quickly talk about your strengths and how that accommodation will enhance your ability to perform the job efficiently. And the steps to preparing a disclosure script: the information should be presented in a clear and concise way um, that is relevant to the position for which you are applying for. Now, remember, requesting accommodation can be done in an interview, once you've been offered a job, or maybe you've been on that job for a year or two, and things are becoming more difficult for you to perform that position. So you remember, you can request that at any time during your time of being employed at a particular employment site. You want to write about your strengths and positive attributes first. You may want to discuss your limitations or challenges, or what accommodations have been successful if you've used some in the past. Discuss what your disability and other life experiences can positively affect your work performance, and end on a positive note. And that's pretty much simple and to the point as far as your disclosure script. You want to have a disclosure script. At this time, I want to see if Karen, if you have any questions or you want to chime in with anything.
Okay, awesome. I have loved the information that you have been sharing. You know, we both work in the field of voc rehab, and so you're definitely sharing some good information. But I did have one question that I felt like would give us some good discussion. You know, these days, employers, every employer, even like Dairy Queen, has an assessment.
Mhm.
Oh Lord, them assessments, child, hurt everybody's feelings. And you
Yes.
know, I've worked directly with some of the similar clientele that you've worked with as well. How would you support someone in asking for an accommodation even at that point? You know, because a lot of employers don't really understand that they need to give accommodation at the application process, because those tests are challenging and it's meant to trip you up in a way to see what your character is and if you will lie and if you will go along with things, or even if I've seen some where they want to know if you are a troublemaker on the job. And
Right.
so, what has been your recent experience with those types of assessments on jobs? Because it's been the warehouse type job that requires those assessments. It's been, you know, the restaurant type job. I mean, I hate to call anybody out, but I was trying to help one of my clients with a Dairy Queen application. And I was like, oh my gosh, in order to do the little scoop, you got
Mhm.
to take this assessment. And they were
Right.
struggling because they kept, it was, you know, they said you get a red, yellow, or green result. And
Uh-huh.
if you didn't get a green, you didn't get a callback. And
Mm.
so it was a challenge. What has been your experience and what could you share with our audience about those assessments?
I've had different experiences. One would be I have asked if they have modified assessments or tests, and 9 times out of 10 they
They do.
don't they don't they don't have it. So the other time I have actually talked with the employer and explained who I was and if I would be allowed to assist that individual with the assessment. And a lot of times that works as well. And if they have to go in and do the assessment again, if you ask for the employer if they have someone that is there to offer that accommodation or be able to help the applicant, most of the time they don't have anyone to do that. So I would say asking for a modified assessment, or if they have it, they're not going to have it, and they are not going to have anyone on staff that can necessarily help that individual. So, for the most part, it's seeing if they will allow a career coach or someone along that line to actually assist them, or either asking for additional time to be taken with the assessment. So to me, each individual employment site is different,
Mhm.
and it's just a matter of if you have a relationship with that employer, or if it's an individual that's just going in that doesn't have that's not utilizing a service such as what we have, then they are going to be ones that can either maybe call you on the phone if they're taking it and kind of say, well, what do you think about this, and just kind of do that. But it's not a lot in place, to be honest, on the side of the employer.
Yeah, it sounds
To,
like the employers still need a lot of education around their requirement to
yeah.
provide that accommodation. I know I've worked with someone who was trying to advance in their position, and you
Hmm.
know there was a test that needed to be taken in order to get to the next level,
Hmm.
and you know she was having some difficulty, but she had already kind of declared disability, but she didn't want to ask for accommodation. And I
Hmm.
tried to explain to her that there's going to be key phrases that you need to say. So if
Hmm.
you go in and you use the word accommodation, They should know all day, every day that now we're stepping into the legal realm
Right,
of
right.
I've made this request. But I
Yeah.
love your point in saying that they also need to make the request in writing, because
Yes.
you might verbally, say that, but then they can get amnesia. But if
Right.
you put that in writing, and then, like I said, just those key phrases of, requesting an accommodation, or, can I have some support,
Mhm.
that puts them in a position to have to do something because you've made that request.
Right. And if it doesn't put an undue hardship on that employer and they have 15 or more employees, then they should provide that accommodation to that individual.
Most
But again,
definitely.
yeah, I agree with you. The employers, they need a lot more education, and for applicants and employees, it's not a lot out there with the assessment process to kind of help or modify or anything. It's
Okay.
more on the applicant or people such as ourselves to try to, assist or help them in that way.
Okay. Well, I have enjoyed your presentation. I think that our audience will learn a lot. If you would like to know more about Miss Toni Davenport and Progressive Rehabilitation Services, her link is on the resource link that we're going to be offering. And so thank you so much, Toni, for participating in the summit. I look forward to doing more events with you in the future.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And one other thing I wanted to add real quickly,
Okay.
for those individuals, we are going through this pandemic now, and we got a lot of people experience stress and anxiety and depression. There may be some individuals that once they go back to work, or maybe they're experiencing that now, they may want to look into, reasonable accommodations, or just looking at their strengths and weaknesses as it relates to this performing the essential functions of the job.
And that's so true. A lot of employers have the EAP program, the Employee Assistance Program, and taking
Mhm.
advantage of that for some short-term counseling and other resources. That's a really good point, because I don't know about you, but to me, there's an underlying level of anxiety that I feel like I'm experiencing, just because this pandemic is
Right.
just totally different, and it's something we've never experienced before. And to be honest, it's something I never thought that I would experience in my lifetime. So,
Right.
you know, so for
Yeah.
some people, it really is impacting their mental health. And
Mhm.
then having to return to work and being back in that environment, someone coughed, you like, uh-oh, what's going on? So definitely, talking to your manager and the HR department, it wouldn't necessarily be disclosing a disability, but just the fact that you're experiencing some anxiety and different things returning to the workplace. I'm hopeful that a lot of employers will have something like that in place
Mhm.
to be able to support their employees.
Yes, I hope so as well.
Well,
Okay.
thank you again, and I truly appreciate your expertise and what you offer to the summit. I'm looking forward to doing some additional work with you in the future.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.